What's happening, you crazy butt rubbers? It's me, Pitmaster Shane D, the International Man of Mystery, back again to share this week's list of 5 things. What's 5 things, you ask? It's a weekly list where I give you, the consumer, some tips and tricks on cooking, what to buy, what not to buy, everything barbecue related, cooking related that I can think of, or sometimes it's just a list of 5 things that irk the crap out of me this week. And this week we're going to be talking about what? You crazy butt rubbers? Pork butts. I think people get pork butts wrong a lot. And it's not because they don't care. It's honestly because they care too much. They're overthinking it. So, I want to just dispel some myths, bring this back down to the basics, and get you dialed in on what is arguably some of the best meat you can cook on a smoker. The old pork butt, the pork shoulder. It's got 100 names, right? It's called butt roast. It's called front leg quarter roast, blah, 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 blah. Because why? It's not even the butt of the pig. It's not the ham. It's not the rump. Nope. It's out of that front shoulder. And there's a lot of confusion. Now, if you grew up in the Southeast like me, everyone equates barbecue to pulled pork. When you say, I'm going to have a barbecue, it generally means they're going to make some pulled pork. Or I want some barbecue. It generally means they're going to have a big old pulled pork sandwich. Whether it's got slaw on it or it's got a mustard sauce or a vinegar sauce, it doesn't matter. That's generally what it means. We didn't mess around with beef that much. The Texas guys, Kansas City folks out in the Midwest, y'all got the beef dialed in. And you will tell us that, brisket and beef ribs are easy where we think they're hard. But I've given more than my fair share of a piece of advice to guys out in Texas and places like that who just can't seem to get that pork butt right. And it's funny, my advice to them is very similar to the advice they give me when it comes to brisket. And a lot of times it's that we're overdoing it. We're letting this get in the way of success. So let's just jump right in. Number one thing I think most people get wrong with pulled pork? What is it? What do you think? Take a guess. Nope, not it. Nope, not that one. Nope. Hey, no, you right there. No, you got it. I think they're cooking them too low. If you're doing this on a pellet pit, Kamado, your granddaddy's old smoker, a block pit, I really think most people cook these things too low. They're down to 225 and below, and honestly, I think the best pork butts come off at about 250 degrees on your pit temp, okay? I know that sounds crazy. You're like, man, low and slow, that's the way to go. Why are you at 250? Well, here's why. There is a lot of fat on that big hunk of meat. And it's a big hunk of meat. It's pretty much all muscle. It's got one little bone in it. If you're cooking a pork butt, if you're cooking the shoulder, obviously it has the elbow and a few other pieces in there. But it's a big hunk of meat and it can take it. And it has a lot of fat to be rendered out. So don't be afraid to crank up that temp to 250. Bring the timetable down so you're not cooking that thing for 16 hours if you're not wrapping it. But I promise you're going to get a little better color and you're going to limit your chances of drying that out if you run your pit at about 250. I've cooked these things at 275 plus from start to finish, and I've had a great product as well. You just have to adjust a few things in the middle. So try bringing your temp up on that pit a little bit, and don't be afraid because it's a big hunk of meat. It can handle it. Number 2, people are overcomplicating what they put on these pork butts, man. My granddad never put anything but salt and pepper on them. When I cook them, I only use large flake kosher salt or sea salt on them. And it's just a light dusting. I don't roll them in there until it looks like it's been snowed on or whatever. But I do put a fair amount of salt on there because, again, it's a big piece of meat and it can take it. A lot of people are putting 15 different rubs on there. You're injecting it with Dr. Pepper and all this other crap. Man, it don't need it. That pork don't need it. Don't get me wrong, it tastes good with some of these injections, but it doesn't need it. If you want a good injection, do apple cider vinegar and apple juice with those some heat elements, and that's all you need. That's all you need. That apple cider vinegar is going to give you enough pop, and the apple juice is going to give you a little bit of sweet, and then you get a little bit of heat back note in there, and you got a perfect injection for a pork butt. You just don't need a lot else, okay? I can't remember outside of competition the last time I injected a pork butt. I just don't do it. My rubs are always simple, and they don't need much. We get comments all the time about how our pork is the best tasting pork anyone ever had. And you know what I really think it is? It's they can taste the pork. Okay, so other than the reasons I've alluded to, why does putting too much stuff on a pork butt even matter? Well, there's a couple things happen here. One, obviously you're overpowering the taste of the pork itself. Pork really only needs salt and smoke to taste really great. I mean, really, really great. The other thing is, now you're inhibiting a smoke ring and smoke getting into the butt. You're going to say, yeah, but I'm also building up bark. And I'm for that. And if you want to put on a bunch of rubs and stuff to your pork butt, there's a proper way to do it. And it goes like this. Light coats every couple hours. Okay? Especially if you're not going to wrap this thing. That allows you to develop nuance between the coats, right? You have the original coat. It's going to be the most barkiest. You got the darkest. And you slowly transition out to these layers like rings on a tree. You know, these kind of growth rings that have slightly different nuance. It also allows you to layer on multiple different rubs, but only after the first several hours and after you have successfully gotten a good amount of smoke into the butt. Does it make sense? Okay. Number 3. Too much drama around what temperature you should be wrapping at, when you should be wrapping, if you wrap at all. And, you know, people just get tripped up on this idea that, oh man, I didn't wrap until 177.8 degrees, right? I wrap at 150 degrees, or I wrap at 140 degrees. Listen, I'm going to tell you, you're all right and you're all absolutely wrong. Every one of you are all equally right and you're all equally wrong. Because, depending on your cooking process, you really should be wrapping at a color. What you really want to do, whether that's at 140 degrees, 150 degrees, 60, 70, 80, 90, whatever, what you really want to do is wait to wrap, if you're going to wrap, until you have achieved that color in the bark that you want. Then you wrap. Okay? Does it make sense? Don't get caught up on, man, you know, I had to wrap at 150 degrees, or I had to wait and wrap until 180 degrees, and that's what dried out my butt. Yeah, it probably did if you waited to wrap that long, if you're gonna wrap, okay? Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek as far as drying out a butt, because these things have so much fat, man. You've got to really work hard to screw them up enough to really dry them out, okay? So don't get caught up in that. If you wrap, great. If you don't, great. I'll tell you now, I wrap 98% of the butts I cook, and the reason why is that I can have them done in about 8 hours flat, start to finish. They still have a great color. They have a great texture to me because of my process. Now, occasionally I get to craving a super barky, amazing, like old school pork shoulder. And I'll let that thing go 18 hours, right? That's the way my grandpa used to do it. And I'll get to craving that. But it's like once a year, literally. I think pulled pork, once you pull it and dice it all together, you're losing a lot of that bark in there anyway. And you do still get some nice pieces with more texture once you've chopped it in there, so you haven't lost it all. But once you combine all that, and that's the point of doing pulled pork, is you've got that big fat cap on the outside, and you're chopping all that fat back into the meat that was in the middle and redistributing that fat, that flavor, the salt, everything you had on the outside now gets combined into one more homogeneous product. That's why we pull pork and chop it together, for exactly that reason. So don't get caught up on the number. Get caught up on the color. Okay. Here's another thing I think most people really get tripped up on. You get asked this question all the time. I've got a 6-pound pork butt, or I've got a 8-pound shoulder, small shoulder by the way. How long is it going to take for this to cook? Because I need to serve this at 2 p.m. tomorrow. You're asking the wrong question. You started out with that statement with the wrong question. And let me tell you why. Pork butts, because they are so fatty, hold like nobody's business. Listen, what do I mean by hold? I mean, once they're done, they maintain their temperature, and they are perfectly succulent, juicy, and amazing. Hey, it's why Sir Mix-a-Lot made that song, right? I like pig butts in a can, not like... Listen, That's why it's even there, right? They hold so well, and I swear they get more succulent and more juicy if you hold them the right way. Put them in a cooler, airtight cooler. When you drop those things in, they're like 198, 200 degrees, whatever temp you're happy with the texture at, and you can hold them for up to 12 hours. Now, what's my limit for a hold? Once I see my temperature on that pork butt slipping down in the 150s, it's time for me to get ready to serve it, okay? 140, you start hitting the danger zone. Below that, bacteria could start to grow, etc., etc. Not really a problem, but something you need to be cognizant of and plan for. So, why did I say you asked the wrong question? Well, if I know I have to hit a timeline where I got to serve this at 2 o'clock the next day, in your mind you're going, okay, when I start it, I got 8 hours, and then I'm going to wrap it, and then I got 2 hours, but what if that doesn't work out? I don't care. I'm going to get this done probably at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm putting it in the Cambro, the cooler, the chill chest, whatever you want to call it, all wrapped up and tidy, and I'm just going to let it sit. Yep, if you wrap it up, you're going to lose some of that bark, but not much. Not much, and I'm going to tell you, the freedom you gain from not being a slave to the pit right up to the moment, your kid's birthday party, the family reunion, whatever it is, the freedom you gain from not being stuck in that cycle is well worth it. And I promise no one is going to give you crap for it because it's going to taste great. I mean it. So, plan plenty of time. If I know I have to hit a certain timeline, like I got to serve this at 2 or 3 p.m., my pork is probably done no later than 10 a.m., which means I put it on about 10 o'clock the night before, and I went to bed. I got up maybe about 6, maybe wrapped it, maybe I didn't, turned it up if I needed to finish, dialed it back if it's going a little too fast. It gives me options because I started so early and I have this beautiful built-in hold time that I know will work. This isn't as delicate as brisket where you've taken off this beautiful succulent brisket, you tried to hold it for 2 hours, and all of a sudden it tightens up, and it's not as tender and succulent as it once was. I have a brisket process where I count on the 2-hour hold. I cook them hotter and faster, and I need that 2 hours to help break it down a little more. So pork butts are super forgiving. Use that to your advantage. So let's not ask how long it's going to take to cook something. Just know that if you plan on it taking 12 hours, and if and this is for an unwrapped or wrapped pork butt, okay, 12 hours is more than enough time for a wrapped pork butt. If you're an unwrapped guy, and you're like, man, that last pork butt of a roughly this size took me 16 hours, great. Plan on 16 hours, and then add about 4 to it. That's right. Start at 20 hours before you eat it if you need to. I would, because I know I can hold it. So factor in that whole time. Use it to your advantage. Don't get tripped up over that. Don't get freaked out by it. As long as you got a decent cooler, it'll hold. Okay? Relax. What does Aaron Rodgers said? Relax, right? I think people just get way too stressed about that stuff, and we don't have to be. So, last but not least, I get asked this question a lot. What do you do to trim your butts? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. If it's not a competition, I don't trim my butts hardly at all. In fact, all I really do is just cut a diamond pattern in the fat cap and rub salt into that and around the edges, and I put them on. Because I have a Roman pork puller, there's a link, that will absolutely decimate all this fat and shred it in and incorporate it. So I don't have these large hunks of fat in there. It reincorporates all of it. So I don't overly trim my pork butts. Some people tell you got to cut the fat cap off, completely off, because it's so slimy and blah, blah, blah. Those people, go back to step 1 or item 1. You're not cooking high enough. You're not getting all that fat to render out. Those people are also likely not scoring their fat, giving it an opportunity to render a little more. And they're not rubbing salt in it. Okay? So, if you're doing those things, you shouldn't have to trim these pork butts for making sandwiches. Hardly at all. So don't get tripped up on that. If you are adverse to fat, fine. Take some of that fat cap off if you want to. Do you. It doesn't matter. Underneath that fat cap, there's also what we call the false cap. It's another layer of meat, There's a little fat underneath that. I'm going to tell you right now, this layer right here, that false cap, is some of my favorite parts of the pork butt because it is literally sandwiched in between 2 layers of fat. It gets like sous vide in fat. It is hands down one of my favorite pieces of pork butt. Unless you're talking pork shoulder, and then I love that cuff meat. I call it cuff meat. My grandpa used to call it that. Where that shoulder comes down, where the hoof used to be. That meat right here, it's ultra like red, and it's so sweet, so good. That's my other favorite piece. Some people talk about the money muscle. Man, you can have a money muscle. If I got that false cap, I got some of that stringy, it's almost like bacony kind of meat, and then I mix that with some of that cuff meat on the sandwich. Woo! You don't get no better than that, y'all. That's why us fat Southeasterners love the pork butt right there. We be singing over that. You can't go wrong with that now. So I hope these 5 things have helped you out. Dial in your pork butt game a little more. If you have more questions, throw them in the chat right below here. I respond to every chat or every message I get. And if you have more messages, feel free to hit me up on Facebook. Hit me up on Twitter at ShaneDBBQ. Hit me up on Instagram. Ask me right here in the comments below. I do my best to give the information back. I recognize that I only have a handful of you guys that watch these each week because I guess only a handful of you are made it past all the boobs on the internet and got down to wanting to see a very average fat guy talk about food. Anyway, as always, guys, I'm Pitmaster Shane D. Thanks for checking us out. Share this with your friends. Tell your mom, tell your pa, tell your cousin from Arkansas that they need to be here with us each week talking about food because this is a conversation direct out of this noggin straight to you, and I want it to be unfiltered and as pure and plain as I can make it, and that's why there's not a lot of production. It is literally me, a couple of things wrote down on a piece of paper, talking to you. We'll catch you next time.